so welcome. We're so excited to do this interview, Dr. Saeed. Um, why don't we first jump into how you became so involved in holistic medicine and mental health, I guess.
Well, thank you again, Tammy, for having me on. This is an absolute pleasure. I am so incredibly excited because this is a topic that I'm super passionate about. But I wasn't always. So, born and raised in Naperville, Illinois, I had all the same bad habits that have led almost all of adults and children down the road to chronic health conditions. And I continued on that hamster wheel like everybody else, just, trying to keep my head above water, just following the social norm. I had constipation, digestive issues, acne, eczema, but again, that was my normal, right? So therefore, I didn't think twice about it. I just continued on that hamster wheel, just trying to keep my head above water. Where I even started residency. Me and my husband were both interns, and we both were working 80-hour work weeks in family medicine residency. And then now we had a newborn. So we were far away from family. So we just, again, really tried to keep our head up against water. With the added stress, then I was also dealing with multiple autoimmune conditions. I even had shingles. I was a mess in my 20s and 30s. So it just continued, and I again was told that was my new normal, until one day after noon conference, my husband had this gut inclination, and he's like, can you go check up on our 10-month-old in daycare? And I was so blessed that there was literally, the daycare was attached to the hospital. So anytime that I was even in an OB floor, I could go a nurse. I was just really exciting stuff. That's why we were there. So I was able to just walk across at a time that I normally don't. And I walked into every mother's worst nightmare. The lights were dim. The daycare provider was rocking back and forth in her chair. The eerie silence was broken by my child's in the back. When I went back there, I saw that my 10-month-old, my gift from the universe, from God, was being suffocated almost to death. His arms and legs were tied down with the receiving blanket. His pacifier was in his mouth. His eyes were bloodshot. He had tears running down his face, and his cheeks were glistening. I immediately picked him up and I ran out. On that day, the universe, God, saved my child. And I promised to God that I would take care of these kids the best that I know how. But then I'm like, hey, how am I going to take care of these kids the best that I know how if I, as a family physician who is supposed to be the specialist in prevention of disease, if I don't even know how to take care of myself, let alone how am I going to take care of this child so then I can prevent and heal his chronic issues and improve it? So I didn't even know really what to do to keep this child and myself truly healthy and happy. And so that's where it, I had to take this step back and look at this. It was like a reality check. And the reality check was that I didn't even know how, despite beside me and my husband being physicians. And then we had pediatrics in the family and ICU in the family. And so all these professionals, and nobody was really able to tell me that. And so I went on this quest because obviously I made this solemn promise and vow to God that, I promise I'm going to take care of these kids, but then how? So I started learning parenting in residency and how we can optimize a child's physical and mental health, along with trying to heal myself. So I started on that journey right after residency. I joined this medical practice where under one roof, there was me, an OBGYN, an internist, an exercise physiologist, nutritionist, counseling, chiropractor, massage therapy, all brought together for the complete healing of the whole person. And that's when it blew my mind that you can actually look at the whole person and not just compartmentalize a patient. What? Right? And so when you do that, the results are remarkable. And I became obsessed and very passionate. I'm like, wait, this is so cool, because people with severe like autoimmune diseases and multiple chronic health conditions that affected almost every organ system, if we can get their bodies back into balance and lower something called chronic inflammation, we can improve not one of these symptoms, but then all of them simultaneously. The world needs to know about this. So I started writing my first book, The Holistic RX, Your Guide to Healing Chronic Inflammation and Disease. It's the best of functional, integrative, holistic medicine under one book, covering over 80 conditions for all ages. Beautiful. So it's literally supplements, homeopathics, acupressure points, and aromatherapy that you can use for 80 some conditions, as in conjunction with your conventional care. And but as I was healing myself and healing my, the patients and implementing it in my own lifestyle with my growing family, I realized, oh my God, all of those key foundations in parenting are also foundational in functional integrative medicine on how to optimize a child's brain and body.
Mm.
Because we as practitioners, as a family physician, we're really taught that, what, this child is born, we really don't dive into the mental health whenever we go see, well children check, well child checks. It's like, okay, just like physical milestones, or maybe some social milestones, really that's it. And make sure you cut the grapes, and make sure you don't give them popcorn before this age, very like, you know like superficial
Yeah.
milestones that we look at. We don't really dive into how are you going to improve their role model, self-esteem, all of that stuff, and really how to parent them. And so when I started researching all of that myself, and when you put the parenting world and the functional medicine world together, oh my gosh, together, it blew my mind that you can actually raise these children and not just leave it up to chance. Because that we feel like when you're given this beautiful baby, that we all look at this kid and like, oh my God, we're responsible for this child for the rest of our lives, not
It's
recognizing that
terrifying.
it's terrifying. And not to really have those tools. We're like, if you have a good kid, it's just chance. If you have a bad kid, it's just chance. No, there's so much that we can do as parents, that we can then implement this child's physiology and their brain chemistry towards the benefiting the humanity, and not impacting them.
Well, I was really interested when you talked about chronic inflammation, because I don't think a lot of people understand. And I assume you're talking about like kind of the gut microbiome, and looking at cortisol, and looking at certain foods we take, and how that can cause inflammation in the body. And then how is that, like, can you explain to our viewers how that's related to mental health? Because people are like, oh, your gut or your heart, like, what has that got to do with mental health? And I know there's a lot there, but can you,
Mm-hmm.
in like a really abbreviated version, share what that has to do with chronic inflammation? How is that related to mental health and wellness?
Inflammation actually means fire inside. It's your body's natural defense responses to your body's immune system as it tries to keep your bad guys out and the good guys in, and even to heal wounds. So without inflammation, we would be in danger, as we would really have no way to fight these microbial invaders or repair damage constantly being inflicted on us. So the thing is, you want the right type of inflammation. Too much can be causing problems, and too little can cause problems. And there's two different types. Acute inflammation is the healthy response, like, it lasts for a short time. It's a sign that your body is working the way that it should. But the thing is, when your immune system is stuck in the on position for too long, that's too much of a good thing. And that's stuck in the on position for too long because of constant modern life's daily exposures to triggers like chronic stress, toxins, artificial fake foods, allergens, low grade infections. And that can start to drive disease, destroying our body, this miracle of a body. And what happens is that, with properly functioning immune system, it can keep this fire under control. But with the constant exposure to triggers, and the inflammatory molecules like cytokines go out of control, destroying everything in its path and damaging tissues and organs, leading to chronic diseases of every stripe. So chronic inflammation can also affect our children's brains. Studies have actually shown that inflammation was found to decrease the strength between the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, which then leads to, causes problems with their decision making. And that then leads to our children to act impulsively. It lacks empathy, making poor decisions, and having less control over their emotions and actions. And then also, we were also, that wasn't enough. Like, these inflammatory precursors like kynureninic acid and quinolinic acid and picolinate are made because inflammation disrupts brain chemistry. So they can't make the serotonin. So you have all these extra precursors that are present and available that then further lead to inflammation. And actually, research has also showed us that inflammation is also associated with accelerated brain aging and impaired cognitive function. And now science has even proven that, depression and anxiety and schizophrenia and bipolar and autism and all of these brain condition are actually directly linked to chronic inflammation.
Yeah. So, what I'm hearing is we talk about mental health. Often we're talking about neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. And most people don't know that's primarily made in our guts, in our intestines, in our stomach. I think I'm not
Yes,
going to quote exactly, but so if our gut isn't healthy and there are toxins or we're not eating the right nutrients, our gut does not produce adequate chemicals, essentially natural, like your neurotransmitters, that help with mood regulation, that help with motivation, that help with sleep, that help with
absolutely.
all of these things. So, what are some, like, if you think of a parent in a grocery store, like really bringing it down to what causes things that parents wouldn't think of, cause inflammation that could prevent the gut from making these neurotransmitters to keep our brain healthy, that could cause
Absolutely.
impulsivity? What are some of those things like that? Because we can talk about the scientific name, but I bet you if you were to go grocery shopping with a client, you could be like, stay away from these things. These will cause that, like everyday items. What can you tell parents? Imagine you're giving them a grocery list of things here. Don't eat this. This is not going to help your kiddo.
So, food is one huge piece of that puzzle, but I really want to emphasize also here that the child's lifestyle and then how they choose to live can actually influence the release of these pro inflammatory cytokines. And these changes can then be also passed off to our offspring. So, we have to ask, you know, what kind of lifestyles are actually contributing to that chronic inflammation, and why are our children so sick, and why are they out of balance? And it's because that their lifestyles are out of balance. They're making the wrong choices because the foods that they're eating, the negativity, the lack of sleep, the increased stress, the increased toxins, actually disconnecting a prefrontal cortex from the amygdala. So therefore, we need to now optimize our children's decision making by, yes, the foods that they put in their bodies, because right now, unfortunately, eating the wrong, our children are eating the wrong food and overeating. So you talked about the gut health, but unfortunately, the food that we eat now is not the same as our ancestors have eaten, and has drastically changed over the last 40 years. In the first part of the 20th century, these chemical altered food substances really replaced real food. And now they're bioengineered and they lack nutrition and they cost billions in manipulating the diet. So it's actually not also the junk food that the kids are eating, it's also the food that they're not eating, unfortunately. And studies have shown that when they don't eat their fruits and vegetables, that does cause a lot of problems. And then we can dive into specifically what foods we should eat. But I really wanted to also touch on the other pieces of that. Is that also it's the environment? When our environment and detoxification pathways are out of balance, that can also lead to a child's, you know, increased inflammation, lack of nature, lack of sleep. I call it stress, sleep, social, and spiritual health. Lack of real social connection, increased negativity is all there. So let's now dive into the grocery store that you were talking about, right? And two things. When you take a parent into a grocery store and you really want to optimize their overall health and well being, you want to show them that it is the real foods that we're talking about. You want to make sure that the child is eating real whole foods. And that's like on the outside of the grocery store. So I have my patients go down a list. Whenever they're hungry, focus on tons of vegetables, clean protein, and healthy fats. So that's what I've also taught to my children. Also, vegetables, clean protein, and healthy fats. That helps them focus on the foods that they should be eating, not the foods that they should not be eating.
So, what are examples of clean proteins and healthy fats?
Yes. So that is, again, um, clean protein we have is grass fed meats, wild caught salmon and fish. We have pasture raised chickens, eggs, and then healthy fats. We have avocados and olives and nuts and seeds. And then we have different types of oils and coconut. You know, there's so many different options there. So again, so we have the and then make sure vegetables, right? Vegetables, focus on those plants, rainbow plants, because these foods all have immune regulating polyphenols in them. So I have my patients and my children eat the rainbow, tons of color, and it's so much fun. Like the more color, the better. And that's what I do even for my kids. I actually lay down a tray, and I did this right before the interview. They came back from school, and I lay down a tray of rainbow veggies for them and rainbow fruit. So that already is appetizing to their brain. But then the thing is, uh, focus on eating the rainbow, focusing on eating diverse, and also do your best with organic is all super important to help with optimizing your overall health and well-being as and optimizing brain health is to focus on tons of vegetables, clean protein, and healthy fats.
Beautiful. And what about, I always wonder about this, are if we're eating ideally, of course, we're going to get proper vitamins. We're going to have that pre and probiotics. But what if families are like, I can't always buy organic. It's too much money. And I want to make sure my child gets all the proper vitamins and nutrients. Is there like, what would you recommend? Like if parents are worried their kids aren't getting everything they need in terms of, would you recommend kids taking vitamins or only getting it from food? Because I know not all vitamins are created equally in terms of how they're dissolved and whether there's the intake, because some of them are too hard. They're manufactured, so your body can't digest them, right?
Mhm. So remember, these nutrients that you're talking about, they regulate every single chemical reaction in your child's body. So those studies have shown that those children that have eaten a rainbow food, whole foods diet packed with color, fiber, nutrients, minerals, good fats actually have healthier brains. They're less violent. They improve behavior, and their bodies are healthier. So, but the thing is, unfortunately, our children are just because of sometimes the medications that they're taking, the soil quality, just actually the food right now doesn't have the same phytochemical properties that it did years ago. So in some situations, I mean, my children do take multivitamins. I do have a really, you just have to focus on the really good high quality. But again, they can't really replace the food. So continue to work on the food piece of it, because we know that your child's gut and their brain are constantly talking to each other.
Mhm.
So to continue to work on the gut microbiome and the diversity through food, but then there's no problem in some supplementing specifically right now, like vitamin D, older kids like magnesium, and then all kids like fish oil, EPA, DHA, and probiotics. But then again, my kids have sauerkraut on a regular basis. So try to get some as much as you possibly can through that food, and then supplement as needed. And that really, if you go to your individual practitioner, they'd be able to tell you exactly which ones is specific for your child. But those are the ones that I recommend. Again, depending on your child's individual needs, and if they're dealing with a chronic illness, they might need a little bit more to help the body heal. But again, just educating the child about the importance of all of these little gut bugs that are keeping our children healthy. Because if these are imbalanced, it increases the immune cells that release cytokines. They talk to each other, they cross the blood-brain barrier, they activate the brain's immune system, and then those specialized immune system, cell like the glial cells, they get activated and they fight the invaders, leading to more inflammation. So it's badness. So educating the child about taking care of the friends in their gut is super important to optimize their immune system, lower inflammation, and thereby optimize the brain and body function to heal and prevent chronic disease now and years to come. So that is really important. And obviously, no supplement is ever going to replace that. But again, growing, you need to optimize the gut microbiome, and that
Yeah.
specifically occurs through food and the
What
diversity
would
of the
you
foods
do?
that you're
So
eating.
oh, sorry. If you've got say a family who has not been eating well and you're trying to take this approach, and you don't want to shame people, that's never how we change health behaviors
Never.
ever, but how would we talk to families about, or at least how parents can talk to kids about changing habits at home? Like say like that family has basically been raising their kids on a diet of Ritz crackers and chips and all of these, processed foods like cookies that are already in boxes. And how would we talk to kids about that? Explaining, like, what about these processed foods is that, without shaming, that reason why we want to stay away from that? Does that make sense? Like, how are we going to talk to kids about that?
So remember, education is power.
Hmm.
So, you know, in my book, I really discuss something called holistic parenting. And holistic parenting is all about love and connection and educating and empowering your child and guiding them along the way, giving them the positive mindset and the life skills they need to navigate our rapidly changing world. So every conversation that you have with a child, every hug, everything that you do, the foods that they put in their bodies, so their stresses, their sleep, the social, their spiritual health, all has a power to mold your children's brains and bodies for the better. So it starts about with building that connection. And you got to build that being a role model first. I think you have to do it yourself. Obviously, if you tell the kid that, oh, you got to eat this way, they're not going to do it. If you're still having Ritz crackers and, cheese is, that's what you're eating, right? All day long. So really work together and say, mom's not perfect. We're going to work together, but educate that if the family is not on board, educate them, build that love and the connection and empower them and the family. So what I have patients do is, I sit there in my patient appointments, I educate the entire family about why it's important, not just tell them, what to do, but also why it's important. And then give them the tools that they need to really take those steps. And remember, I, whenever I talk the talk, I also walk the walk. And that really also, as a practitioner, for those that are practitioners out there, that's super important to understand that when you talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, right?
Yeah.
And that helps to really give confidence to the patient and their families. So I've actually created children's books called Adam's Healing Adventure children's book series, which is Adam is really going through this from sickness to health. And the second one is on rainbow food. The one that I have coming out soon is actually called The Power of Gratitude. So again, children's books and educating them through children's books and learning together, because that's the way that I was able to change slowly, one step at a time, was through my own education. So as I was learning it, I was implementing it on myself, and then I was implementing it on my family. So our change didn't happen overnight, but guess what? That was powerful. That just one change was actually moving me in the right direction, not in the wrong direction. Even if it's just, let's just wake up and be more grateful today.
Yeah.
Gratitude is, so then these simple things can really be powerful.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, we know when people change any health behavior, if they try to change everything at once,
Yeah, no.
it's probably going to tank. So
Yeah.
even just making these small 1 degree turns towards
Yes.
change are going to be more impactful than like cleaning out your whole house and we're going to just eat clean and we're not going to eat any more of this stuff. It's just saying start with small changes, replacing
Small
certain
changes.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, replacing. So in my house, what we do again, focus. If there's one thing that they're gonna do is focus on gratitude every single morning, because I feel that a lot of we're stuck in a world of chronic stress and negativity, and so that chronic stress is keeping us on this cycle of forget this, I'm never going to feel good anyway, so it's better just to eat this, or I'm too busy for this, the kids just need, like, let's focus on the positive. Because when you say immediately when you wake up and say 10 things that you're thankful for, now you science has proven that it now solidifies the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala that helps a child and you make better decisions. It also optimizes their physical and mental health, their mitochondria, they optimize their genetics. It really improves overall. So start with gratitude every morning. That's one thing,
Yeah.
the one tip that I want to start with is start with gratitude every single morning. And then crowd out, don't focus on the foods that you can't have. Start incorporating on the foods that your child should be eating. And and then don't, in my house, the kids still have treats. They still have delicious treats, but but we find healthy replacements for it. So focus on vegetables, clean protein, healthy fats, make sure they're hydrated, but then also slowly but surely, for example, like instead of, Ritz crackers, let's go ahead and get, these, these almond flour crackers. Let's just replace that. And you can even get that at, local grocery stores, and you can really find them at everywhere, even in bulk grocers. So, and then you want to, for example, they're doing Cheez-Its. There's an almond flour version of that that's
Mm.
non-GMO and cleaner. If they're doing Doritos, there is like a healthier option made out of cassava flour. So you want to find those. Like my kids, like we do cakes, so we love to do cake in our house, and I have 5 boys, and I feed a family of 9 on a daily basis. And on the weekends, it can go up to 20. And this is the way that we eat. And the, and it's again, focusing on the foods that you can and replacing that. So when it comes to desserts, almond flour cookies and cakes. Like my simple recipe is 3 cups of almond flour, half a cup of honey, half a cup of avocado oil, 6 pasture-raised eggs, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt. And guess what? There you have a delicious cake that can last all week long. I can put in like a can of pumpkin puree. I can add, 5 bananas for banana bread. I can add blueberries for blueberry muffins. And here now you have a really nutrient dense meal or dessert and because it's made out of almonds, it immediately satiates. You only need a little bit to go a long way. And so you can find those alternatives, and that's what you can see. So it's not like you're depriving your body of, oh my gosh, they're, you won't be able to eat these foods, but to recognize that, I mean, my kids know when they look at the bag, when they read the labels, they know that, oh my God, mama, MSG actually makes me want to eat this food more. So yes, you're spending a little less money on the food quality, but you're spending now more money on food quantity, because these foods and these additives are actually brainwashing us to actually continue to eat and have these, like, cravings for these foods. When you focus on real foods, you actually eat less. Yes, they may be a little bit more expensive, you spend a little bit more money on food quality, but you guess what? You spend less money on food quantity. So that bag of chips, where one person can literally, the other bags, one person can finish the entire bag. Here, that one bag, you only need like a handful to satiate you. Why?
Well,
Because the fact that you don't have those extra additives that make you addicted to it and want more.
you know, I'm curious about. Well, I'm two things come to mind. First, being you mentioned replacing, I assume wheat flour with almond. Is that is there research that lends you to move away from wheat, or is it more the nutrient density of almonds? Just really curious about that.
So both, right? Currently, the wheat that we're eating now is no longer the same wheat that our families have eaten in the past. Wheat has been hybridized where it no longer contains the same nutrient density that the einkorn wheat used to have, and where now it actually has more amylopectin and more gluten than ever before. And that's where um, it's actually leading to our gut going out of balance. Our bodies are not used to that food, and it causes a lot of chronic inflammation. And because you're thinking, I mean, because we hear this all the time, gluten, why should we avoid it?
Hmm.
But it's because of the fact that the wheat today is much different than the wheat of our ancestors. And it does trigger these troubling symptoms in children and adults. And actually, the average human body does react to gluten, prompting this immune response, leading to inflammation and other health issues. So again, it's because of the fact that, it's not the same wheat. It's been hybridized. It contains a superstarch called amylopectin. It raises your blood sugar level higher than others. It raises insulin resistance. It's also sprayed with massive amount of fertilizer and pesticides. This dwarf wheat actually contains more gluten and more phytic acid and amylopectin, and actually has fewer nutrients. And again,
Oh,
and the
so if we were
new big,
eating, so if
yeah.
we were eating the same wheat like 50 years ago, we wouldn't see, we could have kept eating that way. But the fact is, what I'm hearing is humans have modified it so much that our body is like, like I am not having any of this. This is impacting, and that impacts the gut, is what I'm hearing, is
Yes,
the inflammation
absolutely.
response. Okay.
Yes. So, because this new gluten protein molecule is large, and we actually, as humans, lack the specific enzymes to fully break it down. And so, when this partially digested molecule comes in contact with the small intestine, it sparks the immune system and creates this inflammation. And zonulin controls the tight junctions in the gut wall. So gluten can also cause a release of gut cells to release zonulin. And again, zonulin is the protein that can loosen the tight junctions. So, like, it should be nice and tight, but zonulin comes and opens these up a little bit and creates this permeable barrier, leading to leaky gut syndrome or increased intestinal permeability. And so, not only does gluten lead to leaky gut syndrome and food sensitivities, it also leads to this large spike in blood sugar that contributes to blood sugar dysregulation, insulin resistance, obesity, and then further inflammation. And then again, the gluten binds to these opioid receptors in the gut, and the same receptors that morphine and heroin can bind to. So this makes our children's and our bodies crave it, and it even leads to this withdrawal effect when you stop eating it. So in my house, I focus on a nutrient density. So tons of vegetables, clean protein, healthy fats. Again, I want them to enjoy those same. Anytime you eat foods, you want to make sure it helps to heal the gut. It balances your insulin and glucose levels, and it is the most nutrient dense foods for you. And that's vegetables, clean protein, and healthy fats. And that's why I started to steer away from some of the grains, and even definitely gluten, and even some of the grains, particularly. Why? Only because the fact that if my kids eat grains, a lot of it, one, it spikes their blood sugar level. But the thing is, they never eat their vegetables. So whole grains are obviously better. It provides tons of minerals, nutrients, fibers, vitamins. But compared to the other categories, you really don't need it to sustain a healthy existence free of disease. Um, but the reason why I try to steer away from all of that is because I want the focus on tons of vegetables, clean protein, and healthy fats. And they do have grains in different forms here and there. But
Mm.
again, focusing on that diversity of foods and
What about
colors.
what about sugar? So I heard you say when you're talking about your cake, I know you mentioned honey.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've, I know sugar's added to a lot of things, of course, because it makes it like low fat means high sugar. Like that to me is anything, something says low fat, they've increased the sugar or the salt.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we crave, of course, because when we have sugar, we get dopamine spike, which is highly motivating, which is why sugar is so addictive. How can you speak to sugar and gut health? And then what do we do with that? It's a
So,
big one.
yes, right. So
Kids
sugar,
love sugar. We love sugar. Like,
everybody loves sugar. Who doesn't love sugar? But the thing is, that's why it is I mean, we're sort of programmed to want it. This is this legal drug that when we eat sugar, studies have shown that there is actually alterations in the stratum and the amygdala and the cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus and the nucleus accumbens. After sugar intake, in just 12 days of sugar intake, they saw major changes in the brain's dopamine and opioid symptoms. So it actually, sugar weakens the prefrontal cortex. It stimulates the brain reward centers, the same part that again is addicted by these addictive drugs, and it leads to withdrawals. And it also triggers changes in the areas of the hippocampus. It leads to cognitive decline and memory problems and learning issues. And it leads to chronic inflammation. It actually, it feeds the bad bugs. It leads to bad bacterial overgrowth of these pathogenic bacteria and yeast species that then increases the sugar cravings even further. Sugar then drastically weakens your immune system. The oxidative stress and the imbalances in the microbiome lead to this inflammation, which then interferes with the ability of your the white blood cells to do their job properly, to destroy toxins, to fight infections. It makes you sick, all within minutes after eating sugar, and that can actually last up to several hours, which is pretty crazy. Refined sugar also really disrupt the blood sugar balance. That increases then insulin and accumulation of this belly fat and higher cortisol levels. It raises LDL and the triglycerides, and lowers the HDL, and can actually contribute to diabetes and tooth decay and fatty liver. And then you heard all the stuff that it does to the child's brain. So when we give our children the yes, our children want sugar, and we think, oh, we're just going to give it to them because they love it. Look, it's making them happy. Yes, it may make them happy for a very short time, but then what happens is that it leads to a child that's inflamed, that's more impulsive, that craves the wrong foods. It leads to fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, mood swings, ADHD, behavioral issues, and sleep issues. So that really increases a child's food intake and increases the appetite. So in my house, we stay far away from it because guess what? I don't want to be stuck in the kitchen all day long. And I don't want crazy kids that are like dealing with ups and down spikes, or like hangry kids, that the ups and down spikes of that sugar. No, I don't want to deal with any of that. So I focus on nutrient dense sweeteners that are packed with antioxidants that don't raise your blood sugar level as much. And that is one that comes from whole ingredients like, dates, and even honey, and,
Okay.
maple syrup or coconut sugar, that are cleaner. Again, those ones you just need a little bit to go a long way. And that's
Okay.
what I use. So the kids still get their sweetness in. We still make cookies and cakes, and we make all these things, but they have like an alternative sugar that doesn't raise your blood sugar level. And again, another thing about sugar, I also wanted to emphasize, again, also avoid those sugar sweetened beverages like sodas, and because all of that stuff is no go. And
Well, even fruit juice. I was
even
looking
fruit
my
juice contains lots of sugar. And that's,
yeah, and you remove the fiber from it. So then you're
yes.
just left with pure sugar. There's no fiber intake with that. So my kids will get a little bit of juice sometimes, and we always have to water it down. I'm like, you can have a little bit of juice, but then we just put tons of water in it. Which again defeats the purpose at that point. You just get a little bit of flavor. But
Yeah, exactly. It just tells them that exactly that's what we did initially.
yeah, and then
Yeah, and you don't even need it. And now the kids actually, I mean, they're happy with like sparkling water, right? With just a little bit of like flavor, like natural.
the flavor.
Yes, just
What?
has
So
like
if
a
we're
little bit of sweetness in it.
are we love to bake in our house. Like that's just something my kids love. I love doing it. I'm not a big cook, but really love to bake. So
Oh,
instead
I
of
love to
using
bake.
refined sugar, what do I use? Like if I make banana bread or cookies, like what can I use instead of refined white sugar?
So that was a recipe that I said, that's
Is
like
honey. Yeah.
it's a honey, yes. Or you can even use you can use that same quantity, like half a cup, and use maple syrup or coconut sugar. So the sweetener is
Coconut
all
sugar.
up to you. Yeah, coconut sugar, there's date sugar. I mean, the list goes on and on. We're
Okay.
stuck with just these foods. Unfortunately, that's the thing about I mean, the universe has given us hundreds and thousands of different types of varieties of foods, and that, but we're stuck with like the sugar and the white foods, and but if you
Mhm.
start to just move that away, and then there's so many different variety, and I don't usually just stick to one, right? I will, replace it with different types, so then the kids are all getting a different type of, antioxidant or phytonutrient through these different, even in their sweets, in their sweet
Beautiful.
treats.
Well, it's good to know because I was thinking, I'm like, well, you want your kids to enjoy food. And I know if we like completely take out sugar, like a sweetness, not meaning like processed sugar, but I mean even like a sweetness, they're just going to binge if they ever get their hands on it. So we have to give it in some way, because of course our brain does crave it, just in a different form. Eating fruit versus having chocolate might be one thing that we can do. Or you're saying
Or
finding
just a
different type of
healthier
sugar.
chocolate, yeah, like, or healthier chocolates. Like, for example, what I do is I try, like, I mean, here, you can get these ingredients with like 3 ingredients chocolate mints, which is basically just mint, chocolate, and honey.
Hmm.
That's it. So the cleaner, and you can get chocolates made with coconut sugar in it. So you can this kids can still have those replacements, delicious foods, but the thing is just have a replacement, and that way you're still getting the sweetness hit, but not all the bad side effects that come from
Right.
eating that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's really I know I'm passionate about this is looking at because I never knew. I'm a psychologist. They don't teach you this in graduate school how much the gut impacts the brain. Like you think of the brain as almost separate from the body and it turns out all these things. Like we always think of neurotransmitters in terms of like antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. And it's like, well, as it turns out, our food has everything to do with our depression and our sleep, because you can't disconnect the gut from the brain. Like those two organisms are
No,
constantly in communication. And what I'm hearing,
absolutely.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
it's getting,
remember that,
yeah,
for every one message that the brain sends down to the gut, there's 9 different messages that the gut is sending up to the brain.
wow.
So this chronic inflammation, dysbiosis can actually, the dysbiosis in the gut, leaky gut in the brain can actually lead to leaky gut in the gut can actually cause leaky brain syndrome. And that's because of the fact that these cytokines that are activated, and because of the inflammation, and you have these cytokines that are activated, and that then activates these microglia that turn it in an alert inflammation mode that leads to dysregulation, and that leads to, but then for a short time it's okay, but then if it gets stuck in that position for a long time, it leads to more microglial activation, leading to further inflammation. So yes, inflammation of the gut is it actually dysregulates, when you have leaky gut syndrome, or increased intestinal permeability, it leads to chronic inflammation, leads to dysregulated connection between the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, leading to irrational decision making, symptoms like brain fog, mood swings, mood disorders, tics, anxiety, sleep issues, more mood disorders, even autism in those with the gut dysfunction. So a thriving gut microbiome promotes this learning, memory, good behavior, and good mood. So again,
Yeah.
it's really complex, but it's super, super important.
I know as a psychologist, when I have kids come in to the clinic and we talk about whether they're coming in with a potential diagnosis for depression or anxiety or ADHD, whatever that is, one of the first things that I really encourage them to do, because most medical doctors, GPs, don't focus on gut health. They don't. It's just not in Canada anyway. It's just not part of the conversation. It's like, here's a drug. What are your symptoms? What can we give you as a prescription? So in Canada anyway, a lot of times you have to go to see a naturopath in order for them to really talk about this. And so I often say, before you go see a psychiatrist, go talk to a naturopathic doctor or nutritionist before we jump to medication. Of course, we're going to try the counseling, but we have to make sure we're getting the mental health check. We're doing the counseling, but we're also taking an assessment of what's going into your child's body. And that can help us rule out if this is just organic, meaning, what they're eating could be just causing all of your symptoms. You don't even need the counseling. Like really, a connection's important, and we can do an assessment there. But this could all be caused by what your child's ingesting or not moving. I mean, then movement's a whole nother conversation we need to have, and sleep and
And
connection and
sleep and
attachment.
connections
Yeah,
and
I
negativity. So there's like lots of different, but again, I mean, back to your nutrition aspect that we were talking about, educating the child, educating yourself about what the child is actually putting and what you're putting in your body. Because, for example, like, I mean, art, again, something that I was not taught, that these artificial colors associated with everything from cancer to hyperactivity in children. They're actually carcinogens, and they're neurotoxins, like blue number one. So some research suggests it's a potential neurotoxin. And red number 3 is an animal carcinogen. Red number 40 causes hyperactivity in children, accelerated in appearance of tumors. Um, yellow number 5 is actually a hormone disruptor. It leads to hyperactivity in children. It can be these yellow dyes are xenoestrogens that can disrupt children's hormones. I mean, and then these aluminum additives are linked to neurotoxicity. We have, like, you know things like calcium propionate, which produces which you find in all of our delicious breads that these kids are eating all day long, and we are eating all day long. And that actually produces a neurotoxin, and that affects the microbiome that causes autism and ADHD and sleep disturbances in children. So if we just start to understand what we're actually putting in our children's bodies, even MSG, right? MSG is monosodium glutamate, is a neurotoxin that kills the brain cells. It causes headaches and allergies and damages the gut and increases food cravings and irresistibility. So that is just the beginning. We just have to educate ourselves, and that's where I mean, I've educated the children to the point where, we call this food what it is, our chemicals. So when the kids go to a party, for instance, they know that these foods are chemicals, and they actually stay far away from it because they're like, why would I want to put chemicals in my body? But again, we as parents need to provide them with an alternative that's equally delicious and if
Yeah.
better. And so, you know, just a quick instance, and then teach our children, to be mindful of their bodies, because again, mindfulness is a huge piece of the puzzle that we are not really, implementing as adults, right? Let alone
Mhm.
children. But teaching our children to be mindful of their emotions, of their brains and their bodies, and to, for example, you know, if a child, like for example, my children, immediately when they start to feel a little off balance, like for example, my 7-year-old actually woke up one day and he said, Mama, I'm going to eat some sauerkraut today for breakfast. I was like, why are you going to eat sauerkraut for breakfast? Like, that's weird. And he's like, Mama, because the fact that I woke up and I felt a little agitated in my brain. I think it was because of the organic sugar, even like he's organic sugar that I had at Nana's house yesterday. And what happened? So therefore, I just want some sauerkraut so I can feed my good bacteria. And and when you um, and when I feed my good bacteria, it'll help me feel less agitated. This is a seven
Wow.
year old.
Oh my
This is a
goodness, that's
7 year old. This is when I'm like, I need to write this book, because the fact that now you're empowering now us as parents, and we're empowering these children, that yes, no, even before it becomes a problem, that these, when you're agitated, when you're frustrated, when you're angry, these are all signs to listen to your body. Like, why am I feeling this way? And yes, it could, in this case, he was 7, he linked it directly to his food, but it could be maybe his sleep, his stress, what kind of social and environmental, because holistic parenting really helps, you know, put your child's body back into balance. It helps to empower and educate them to be mindful of their emotions and their mind, their body, and the soul, and know when it starts to become out of balance. And when it immediately starts to come out of balance, you as a parent have given them the tools that it needs to quickly be able to fix it and increase resilience in any situation. And
beautiful.
so,
And I know, yeah, you have a great book called The Holistic RX for Kids: Parenting Healthy Brains and Bodies in a Changing World. And that would be a good place for parents to start, correct? Like parents could start
yes,
there. Okay.
start there, because I live this lifestyle. I have 5 children. I have a large family. I live in a multi generation household. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And it's not just rocket science, it's things that we teach our children every day. Like, so just like we're teaching our children to brush our teeth every morning, we should be giving them these, stress management techniques. We should be giving them, these foods that you should, increase as soon as you start to feel a little bit wonky. Like, oh no, if you're not feeling well, maybe you need to eat these foods a little bit more, just
Uh,
so it gives them tools, and not
yeah,
just leaves them like their hands up and just says we're going to
I
have to just deal
I
with the
have to
symptoms.
I have to laugh. My husband is Ukrainian, and if you know anything about Ukrainians, they love sauerkraut. Like, oh my goodness, it is it. And I have yet to learn how to eat this food, and I am gonna tell him this when I get home, because we're actually having sauerkraut tonight with like pierogies, and I'm gonna be like, so let me tell you what this doctor told me today in our podcast. He's going to be like, I told you this is why I never get sick, and it's true. He never gets sick, and he eats this all the time. And it anyway,
It
I'm gonna have
is.
to learn.
It's like it's the best. It optimizes the gut microbiome because it's packed with phytonutrients and probiotics. And actually, in my house, we actually the easiest way for me to get probiotics and then these sauerkraut into the kids is actually have it along with breakfast. So they're having their breakfast of eggs and fruit and avocado or whatever it is, whatever they want, and um and then they have like this different assortments um of different colors of sauerkraut. So I actually, from a farmer's market, you could make it. I don't have enough time to make it. uh, or the energy to cut all those things. So I just buy it. But from a farmer's market, I actually get like I have beet sauerkraut, and then I have carrot sauerkraut, and then I have the turmeric sauerkraut, and I have like all different varieties. It's like a rainbow that I'll just put again. I'll take that out. I'll put different colors on, so the kids every day will get a different type of sauerkraut, and they'll eat it with their eggs or their avocado, or they'll just take a spoonful with their bar if they're running. Like they'll have like a protein bar, and then they'll just take a spoon of sauerkraut and run out. Just
Hmm,
to optimize their gut
so
microbiome.
interesting.
Yes, and it's just
Yeah.
simple ways that you can incorporate. So that's how I incorporate it in my
Hmm.
house, because otherwise it gets a little difficult. I just incorporate with the meals.
Okay, good to know. And the other resource I wanted to give parents was this podcast. It's your kids run it, called
Yes.
The Holistic Kids Podcast, which is really exciting. So I will tell people, where can they find that podcast? On Apple, on
Yes,
Spotify?
anywhere you can listen to your podcasts, that it would be available there. It is my 15-year-old, 11-year-old, and 9-year-old that have put together that podcast. They've been doing it for over 2 years now. We're actually, yeah, so in like June it'll be 3 years, so 2.5 years. And what's exciting is that they've already interviewed over 80 guests.
Wow.
So they started. My youngest was like, oh, well, he was 7 when he started, and they've been interviewing these people every week about kids, educating other kids about the power of a healthy lifestyle and things that they
Hmm.
can do to empower themselves.
That
So
you should be a proud mama. That's amazing.
I am so excited. Yes, that's literally. I look at them. I'm like, oh, you guys are so adorable. Because actually, one, it's not me just telling them the same stuff. You have all these professionals, but they're interviewing New York Times bestsellers and actors and actresses and anchors. The Wall Street Journal's White House correspondents. Like people who are
Wow.
interviewing the president. These kids are interviewing them. So it
Very
is
neat.
really, really powerful to get your kids into that leadership positions. We are putting together a conference coming up soon called the Change Making Kids. Putting that together to give our kids these leadership skills. So yes, my kids have been doing this. We're preparing for a TED Talk. Well, auditioning for a TED Talk right now. So there we got to get our kids. I think there's us as parents have we been yes, we need to educate ourselves, but involve your children in that process. And that's what COVID and all that quarantine taught me. So all these we also have a children's book series called Adam's Healing Adventure that the kids helped write with me. So get your kids involved, in
Yeah.
whatever you're doing. Give them those leadership opportunities, because we give them a lot less credit than they are due. So they can do a lot.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Saeed, for your time and your inspiration. And we love collaborating with you. And I'm sure we'll be collaborating in the near future as well. So you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And again, congratulations on your new baby. And take care of yourself as you're in your recovery. And yes.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yes.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Okay. Just